The young and the restless spoilers. The streets of Paris had never looked colder to Chance. Beneath the romantic glow of golden street lamps and the distant hum of the Seine at night, a storm of confusion swirled inside him. The envelope had arrived without warning, slipped under the door of his temporary flat in D.C., sealed tightly, no return address, but carrying a weight that screamed tragedy. He had almost ignored it. Almost tossed it into the fire. But something. A gnawing instinct, a shadow of déjà vu, made him open it. The moment his eyes landed on the word DNA, followed by names of his codes, and a date that matched a time long before either he or Cane had made their way into the spotlight of Genoa City, the ground beneath his carefully constructed world began to fracture. The message inside was chillingly brief: this is only the beginning. He's not just a threat. He's your blood. A surge of heat rose to his head, a tremor in his hands. There had to be a mistake. There had to be. He didn't even pack properly. He booked the earliest flight to Paris, where Cane had recently been spotted maneuvering through the shadows of Dumas' empire, leaving behind whispers and suspicion in every room he exited. Chance hadn't seen Cane in years, not since his departure from Genoa City sent shockwaves through Chancellor Winters and left broken trust in his wake. But the man in the envelope, the alleged twin, the brother Chance never knew he had, was more than just an echo of a stranger. As Chance stared at the attached photos, the resemblance became impossible to ignore. They were practically mirror images, the same intensity in the eyes, the same angular jawline, even the same crooked smile in moments of rare warmth. It wasn't coincidence anymore. It was confrontation with destiny. In Paris, Cane wasn't the man he used to be. Gone were the casual arrogance and smooth-talking charm that once defined him. He had been rebranded, repackaged, and reinserted into a world that didn't quite know how to define him anymore. Some called him Aristotle Dumas, the mastermind behind a billion-dollar business revival. Others whispered he was a ghost from the past, rewriting his identity to cover something deeper, something darker. But even Cane didn't anticipate the storm that would hit when Chance walked into that rooftop lounge on the Champs-Élysées, eyes burning with uncertainty, clutched envelope in hand. Cane had been expecting a confrontation, maybe even a warning about Victor Newman or Billy Abbott, both of whom had reasons to target him, but not this. Chance didn't say a word as he handed the envelope over. He didn't need to. The moment Cane opened it and read the documents inside, time suspended itself between them. At first, Cane laughed, a short, disbelieving, defensive bark of mockery. Another trick. Another manipulation. But as he scanned the detailed reports, the lab's insignia, the authenticated records of two newborns separated at birth in Australia decades ago, his hand began to tremble. The document didn't ask him to believe. It proved it. And when he looked up, locking eyes with Chance, the denial melted into something raw and fragile. For the first time in his life, Cane Ashby didn't have a retort. He just let the paper fall to the table, tears stinging his eyes, and whispered, "Brother?" The word hit them both like thunder. Chance nodded slowly, unsure of what emotion should take the wheel. Anger? Betrayal? Relief? The man in front of him wasn't just another connection in the endless web of Chancellor Newman Jabot intrigue. He was blood. Family. A piece of himself that had been hidden away by someone, perhaps out of protection, perhaps out of cruelty, perhaps as part of something far larger and more dangerous than either of them could imagine. The weight of that silence engulfed the rooftop. The city below moved on in blissful ignorance, but up there, on that isolated stage, two lives were being rewritten. It was Cane who broke first. With a half-laugh, half-sob, he stood and embraced Chance. For a moment, they didn't speak, didn't breathe, just stood in the gravity of the truth, two souls that had danced around each other for years, unknowingly orbiting the same origin. They had faced off as adversaries, circled one another as if connected by rivalry, mistrust, and ambition. But now all of that paled in comparison to this revelation. They were brothers. Twins. Two sides of a broken mirror that someone had hidden and buried. And worse yet, that someone had gone to great lengths to keep them apart. The questions flooded in like a tsunami. Who had orchestrated the separation? Who had buried the truth and waited until now, why now, to unleash it? And what did it mean that the message in the envelope labeled this truth a tragedy? Who wanted them to know, and who had everything to lose because they did? Cane's mind spun wildly. The adoption files he'd once reviewed years ago, back when he searched for fragments of his childhood, suddenly took on new meaning. Names he'd overlooked. Locations that matched too closely. And what of the strange phone call he'd received 2 nights earlier? A distorted voice saying simply, "You'll never outrun your past?" At the time he thought it was another business threat. Now he wondered if someone had been trying to warn him. Or manipulate him. Or break him. Because this changed everything. It meant every move he made in Genoa City had been part of a puzzle he didn't even know he was solving. Every rivalry. Every betrayal. Every close call. And if Chance was his twin, did that mean someone had planted him at Chancellor as part of a plan from decades ago? Chance, too, was reeling. His career as a federal agent had taught him to distrust everything. But nothing in his training prepared him for the betrayal of biology. He had believed himself a lone soldier in a family already twisted with scandal. Now he wasn't alone, but the loneliness hadn't vanished. It had multiplied. The happiness of finding a brother was laced with dread. What else had been hidden from him? And more importantly, who else knew? Back at their hotel that night, neither could sleep. They stayed up with old photos, digital archives, and late-night calls to contacts who could pull medical records from long-closed hospitals in Sydney. And slowly, a theory began to form. Not just that they were twins, but that they had been separated intentionally by someone with the power to erase birth records, fabricate identities, and keep them from ever questioning their pasts. Cane remembered whispers about a secret benefactor during his early years, someone who paid for his education anonymously. Chance recalled vague memories of being told not to ask questions about his earliest days, as if doing so would unlock a vault that should remain sealed. Together, the patterns became undeniable. But what truly broke them was the realization that this revelation wasn't an accident. Someone had sent that envelope with purpose. And that someone had labeled it a tragedy. That wasn't the language of celebration. That was the language of warning. And it begged the question neither wanted to speak aloud: was this about reuniting two brothers, or was it the first move in a plot to destroy them both? Still, despite the storm of questions, the bond that bloomed between Cane and Chance over the next few days was unshakable. Their conversations were honest in a way neither had experienced before. They confessed fears, regrets, even the betrayals they'd been party to, because suddenly none of that mattered. What mattered was that they had each other. And that no one, not Victor, not Billy, not any shadow from the past, would break what they'd just discovered. Cane promised to stand beside Chance, no matter the fallout. And Chance, who had never trusted easily, found himself opening to Cane in ways that felt terrifying yet right. They weren't just allies now. They were brothers. And if this secret had survived decades in silence, then its reveal surely meant war was coming. And for the first time, instead of being two men on opposite sides of every fight, they were ready to face it, side by side. Let me know if you'd like to continue this story, expand it with more twists, e.g., involving Jill, Victor, or Amanda, or explore who sent the envelope and why. In the days that followed their reunion, something unshakable had formed between Chance and Cane, not merely the revelation that they were twin brothers separated by a conspiracy larger than either of them had imagined, but the quiet, undeniable truth of belonging. It was the way they instinctively moved in sync, finishing each other's thoughts without even trying. It was the uncanny echo in their voices, the identical hesitations when they were caught in a lie, the shared way they looked away when emotions stirred too close to the surface. Neither man had ever been given the luxury of true brotherhood before. And now, that gift, so sudden, so overwhelming, became the center of their universe. But Paris had ears, and Genoa City had sharper ones. It didn't take long for the whispers to reach the wrong people. Chance had always known that secrets never stayed hidden for long, not in his world, not in Cane's, and especially not in the cruel spotlight of Newman attention. Still, he hadn't expected the reaction to be so immediate, so suspicious, so violently dismissive. It began with probing phone calls from the States, questions disguised as concern, messages coded with distrust. By the time Victor Newman reached out, it was clear something deeper was unraveling. Victor didn't ask, he demanded. In that clipped, calculated voice that had once made corporate titans flinch, he issued a challenge from across the Atlantic. "You expect me to believe this," he growled into the encrypted call that Chance chose not to answer. But Victor didn't need a reply. He had already begun to move the pieces, employing private labs, old contacts, even the occasional favor owed by foreign officials. The envelope, the mysterious DNA results that had turned two men into brothers, was no longer a personal revelation. It was evidence. And in Victor's world, evidence was leverage or liability. Never truth. Chance could feel it coming. The wall of doubt. The avalanche of suspicion. The inevitable turning of eyes, all questioning the authenticity of what he now held sacred. But he didn't care. He had found his brother. He wasn't going to let anyone unravel it with bureaucratic skepticism or forensic paranoia. He had seen it in Cane's eyes, that first flicker of disbelief melting into something raw and real. He had heard it in his own voice, trembling with conviction. They didn't need another test. They didn't need sterile lab reports or sterile men in lab coats to confirm what their hearts already knew. The blood might have been tested once, but the bond had been tested daily since they met. And it hadn't failed. Still, the pressure came. "You should test again," Jill had said bluntly in a voicemail. "Not for you. For Cane." She didn't say it, but Chance could hear it in her tone, the same tone she used when she questioned his loyalty to the Chancellor name. As if Cane had manipulated this. As if he'd known something and was using it. As if the brotherhood they now embraced was a carefully engineered ruse. But Chance refused. He burned the second test kit that mysteriously arrived at his hotel door. He deleted the emails from anonymous sources offering him real answers. And when someone tried to follow Cane home one night, lingering a little too long in the alley behind the flat, Chance acted. It wasn't violence. Not yet. But it was a promise, sharp and deadly and absolute. When he grabbed the stalker by the collar and slammed him against the wall, he didn't need a badge or a gun to make his point. His words alone carved the message into the air like broken glass: "Anyone touches my brother again, I will bury them in ways they won't be found." Cane watched it all unfold with a mixture of gratitude and dread. Gratitude for the brother who now defended him so unconditionally. Dread for the war that was clearly coming, one he knew Victor would orchestrate the moment the facts no longer suited his narrative. And Cane had danced with Victor before. He knew the man's suspicions weren't born of paranoia but control. Victor didn't like unpredictability. And what could be more unpredictable than two supposed enemies becoming family overnight? Victor wasn't quiet about his doubts either. At Newman headquarters, he tossed the DNA report across the table during a meeting with Nate and Victoria. "It's too neat," he snapped. "Too convenient. Cane returns from the dead with a new face and a new name, and now suddenly he's Chance's twin?" His fingers tapped against the mahogany table, an erratic rhythm that betrayed the unease he so expertly masked. "Do you know what this means if it's true? Do you know what it means if it's not?" Victoria frowned. "You think it's a setup?" "I think," Victor said coldly, "that someone wants to confuse the lines of inheritance. Legitimacy. Loyalty. Maybe even access." He didn't say whose inheritance, but everyone in the room understood. Back in Paris, Cane began to feel the shadow stretch across his days. He noticed familiar faces where they shouldn't be. He found a file on his hotel desk with photos of him and Chance having dinner, each snapshot marked with time and location. And one night, a note was slipped under his door. Blood can be faked. Loyalty cannot. When he showed the note to Chance, he expected another firestorm. Instead, Chance merely folded it into his wallet and looked him dead in the eye. I don't need another test, Cane. I don't need a lab or a lawyer or Victor's army of analysts. I know you're my brother. That's the only truth I'm standing on. And if they come for you again, they come for me too. The fierceness in his voice wasn't desperation. It was certainty. A new kind of family loyalty. Earned not through genetics or legacy, but through shared pain, mutual protection, and the kind of brotherhood forged under threat, not in comfort. Cane had never had anyone stand for him like that. Not even Jill, not even Lily. And now that he did, he knew he couldn't run anymore. Whatever this mystery was, who sent the envelope, who separated them, who was trying to undo it now, he would face it. But not alone. And somewhere in Genoa City, Victor watched surveillance footage with narrowed eyes. A second copy of the DNA report lay beside him. The test is real, he murmured, barely audible to even himself. But so is the threat. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled under his chin. This changes everything. Let me know if you'd like to continue the next chapter, perhaps the reveal of who sent the envelope, or a deeper exploration into how Jill and Victor were involved in hiding the truth. We can also introduce a twist. That Chance and Cane were separated for reasons involving criminal cover-ups, corporate espionage, or something much darker.